Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online across Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. So whether you're in Bristol or far, far away, you can join in the conversation. So my name is Martin O'Leary. I am the studio's creative technologist. I'm a white man with long brown hair, kind of bald on top. I'm wearing a green jumper and black jeans. I'm normally wearing blue jeans. I'm wearing black jeans today. So these lunchtime talks are part of our Open Studio Friday offer. So every Friday we throw open the doors of the studio and offer you the chance to spend some time in our space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And these talks, they cover everything from innovative research in the fields of creativity and technology, projects in progress, and things that are needing of feedback, questions, and curious minds. And now, can I get a show of hands? Who here is new to the studio? Who's their first time? Well, welcome to all of you. For the rest of you, you've heard this bit before. Maybe you want to get online and share the link to this talk and see how many people we can get watching today. See if we can break some records. So what is the Pervasive Media Studio? We are a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding, product development to performance art. We're a partnership between the University of Bristol, the University of West of England and Watershed, which is where we are today. We're a home for embryonic ideas, research and development and the building of new companies. And we're a meeting place for the creative and commercial industries. We offer studio space, desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities for our residents, all for free as part of our spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And we're a space for people to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. Now, a quick bit of housekeeping. Please do feel free to move around, make a cup of tea, grab a glass of water from the kitchen. Please don't use the microwave, it interferes with something. We have a quiet space just in here. If you need to take a little break at any point, feel free to go in there. Fire exits are at either end of the studio. In the event of a fire, we do not have a drill plan, so if there is a fire alarm, it's real. One of the studio team will direct you to the fire exits. And accessible toilets and baby change can be found in the corridor just next to the kitchen. So a captioned version of this talk will be available here after the talk is finished. And if you're watching online and you like subtitles, that's not true anymore. You can get subtitles on the YouTube stream now. I just haven't updated the script. So that's fine. Yeah, it's good. But yeah, just search for Pervasive Media Studio. You'll find it. There will be a Q&A at the end of this talk. So for those of you who are watching online, you can pop your questions in the YouTube chat or tweet at us on @PMStudioUK. And if you're in the building, you can just raise your hand. Now you can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio or to @PMStudioUK on Twitter or to @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. We've got consistent branding across everything. It's great. But for now, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Studio residents Alison Neighbour and Taram. I've lost my script, so I don't know what they do. They're going to talk to you today about their approach to using game mechanics to entice new audiences and the risks and joys of a very ambitious experiment in audience engagement. So please give a big hand to Alison and Taram.
Hi everybody. It's really nice to be here with all of you in actual physical person. We've got some other friends with us that we'd like to introduce you to, just for you to take care of for the duration of the talk, if that's all right. So we're just going to come round and offer some of you the chance to take care of some of our Sea Gooseberry friends. So this is Nemo.
Would you like to
look
this
after
is Mary,
Nemo.
spelled M-A-R-I. So remember look after that one.
Oh, Nemo won't mind if you
This is
forget.
Christopher.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah. And would you like to look after this? This is Sarin.
This is Mary. Take care of Mary. It's a Finnish name, so it does actually relate to the sea. This is Hafren. Oh, you've got a notebook. Would you like to look after one, or do you want? And this is Ahab. It's possible that the little friends that we've just given you might wake up at some point. during the talk. So if they wake up, you'll know, it'll be obvious. Just hold them up so everyone can see. So we're going to talk today about Beacons, which is this massive, crazy project that we made. It was 9 months of community-focused creative engagement that pervaded everyday life and pervaded a whole, not just a town, a district. It got expanded quite ambitiously to include a whole district of the town of Folkestone and the rural area of Hythe and Romney Marsh, which is quite a large area of not particularly well populated rural area. So it was about bringing those communities together and connecting people, and it invited audiences into a myth that they could start to make their own, and there was an element of co-creation in it as well. And the idea, let's go to the next, it's not moving. There we are. So the idea came from really wanting to co-build experiences with audiences. And my work, a lot of my research is really around participatory sonography. So 2 massive words that probably don't mean too much. Oh, my slide has disappeared. Oh, there we go. Okay. So what I mean by participatory sonography is that the audience participate in creating the shape of the space. So they play an active role in how we create the space, how we create the moment, but without the kind of scariness of like interactive theatre where you have to turn up and wear a funny nose and a funny hat. You just have to be there, like you're here. So it's really also about the space and the environment being the lead element of the work, and the physical shape of what's happening echoing the meaning. So that was really what I was trying to do. And with this piece, the story was about ecosystem interdependence, about how we're all dependent on each other, people, places, plants, community. And over the course of the 4 years it took us to develop this work, that really, as the course of events happened in the world, that really took on a new meaning and became much deeper than just about the environment and about how we all seek coming together at a time when coming together was very difficult. So this idea really formed into creating this moment. This was like a really early sketch for the work. This moment of coming together with lights. So coming from different places, bringing these lights, and all needing to be present for it to work. That was the absolutely crucial thing. Everyone had to be there for it to work. If people didn't turn up, there was going to be nothing to see. And that was really the kind of big risk that we were working with. And the big questions I entered this with were, how do we invite people in? How do we get people to come and experience and enjoy this work and feel like it is something for them? People who maybe, if we just said we're going to do a show on the beach, would be like, I don't like shows, I don't like the beach, I don't like art, or whatever. How do we really invite those people deeply? How do we expand the invitation out so that the invitation is located where they are and we're not expecting them to come to this thing that we've made out of their comfort zone? And also really what signals were needed for the audience so they would understand how to engage with it, but also keeping enough space for them to interpret it in their own ways. So those were kind of the big challenges. So this was kind of the idea around having these lights. And then I met these little guys on the beach. So these are Sea Gooseberries. They come every spring. They genuinely are one of our ancient ancestors. It's either sea gooseberries or sea sponges are what we're actually all descended from, which I thought was pretty cool. They have this incredible phosphorescent light when they're swimming. And these are real pictures that I took on the beach of these sea gooseberries. They're also found in every ocean in the world. So in terms of a story about connectiveness, they were just the perfect characters to involve in that. So this story started to evolve around the sea gooseberries, and it became this month-long quest across 50 locations in Folkestone, Hythe and Romney Marsh to find traces of these sea gooseberries and their magic and their stories that were embedded in the landscape that they carried with them. And the idea was that the audience would have to find them and reunite them on the beach on a given day and a given time, and that would fulfill an ancient prophecy of bringing these creatures together and our interdependence. And if it worked, then there was hope. for the planet, for us. And if it didn't work, then maybe there was less hope. So you can see how high the stakes were in terms of this needing to work. So I'm just going to hand over to Taryn to talk a little bit more about the story.
Well, hello, I'm Taryn. I'm a hairy guy wearing a colourful shirt, and it's very strange to be talking to you all. It's like this face-to-face, in-person thing. The graphics are amazing. It's almost like we're all in the same room together. So, anyway, what I want to do is, as this is a Pervasive Media Studio talk, is to kind of pull back the curtain just a little bit on some of the techniques that we used. So if you're making a standard theatre piece or film or writing a book, then it's a very linear narrative. And you can kind of be fairly sure that the things that you show to your audience are the things they're going to see. But with this, it's a very branching narrative, and people they get this story in different orders, they don't get the whole story, which makes it quite interesting. But it has this kind of advantage, and I'm going to call this kind of playing to the synchronicity. By creating lots and lots of detail in the story, you can sometimes create really magic moments for people. And I'll give you an example. Our composer, who Emily Peasgood, she composed the choral piece that occurred at the gathering at the end of when everyone met together, and the words and lyrics aren't English words. They're kind of taken from all sorts of language, and she ascribed a meaning to every single one of these words and phrases. So we were able to use these as words within the piece. So the boxes in the treasure hunt had a word or phrase associated with them. When you found one, you could go to the website, put it in, and then you'd find out what that word meant. And we had a lovely moment during the gathering where someone suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, they're singing the name of my sea gooseberry," which I thought, and little things like that, I think, can really make a piece. So when people are out and about, they can make connections that you wouldn't otherwise make in a conventional piece. I also wanted to talk about the sea gooseberries. So we have some sea gooseberries around the place. So there, I think it's really important when doing a piece like this that the tech is part of the story. So it's not technology, it's magic, and it's all a part of the story. So they, I'm losing my track here. So what I shall do is consult some notes. Right, I know where I am. Yeah. So people really make a connection with sea gooseberries, and again, we had some lovely parts of this. Once they'd done part of the treasure hunt, they would be told that the sea gooseberry was coming to visit them, and it would arrive at their house. And we had a lovely video where some children had made up a sea gooseberry bed ready for when their sea gooseberry arrived. And it was, I'm not sure, we may have a slide of this later. When people came to the gathering, they they were told that they'd have to bring their sea gooseberries back so that they all come together, and they knew that they would have to give their sea gooseberries up, but that the sea gooseberries would be reunited. And there were, I think there was even some tears, losing that. But there was a lovely moment where two little girls were running round the circle at the end of the performance in the gathering, saying goodbye to all the sea gooseberries. And I think it's moments like that that really make for a magical experience. So I'm going to hand back to Alison, and she'll tell you some more.
Thanks, Taryn. So, as Taryn was saying, the story and the detail was really, really important, and you can see here some images of the quest happening. And these song cards had the words from the song, so people were collecting these song cards. People had these maps that they were exploring, and you would find a little box. If anyone wants to come up at the end, we've got some of the props and stuff here. You can have a little explore of, the very tactile environment that people were experiencing at every place where they went on the treasure hunt. There were 50 locations. 3 people found all of those 50 locations. Even I didn't go to all 50 locations. They were really far apart, so we were pretty impressed with that. And also there was a lot of the community engagement was really embedded from a very early stage. So this is Jenny, who is one of our Sea Gooseberry guardians. So we had, at the beginning of it, we had 13 Sea Gooseberry guardians who worked with us for 9 months. Starting out during the March lockdown and doing stuff remotely, and then we were gradually able to do stuff in person. And what they did was they went around their own communities, their own networks, and they collected wisdoms like the one that you can see on the slide there that says fossils, waltzes, raving, lipstick, the ferry, tattoos, calm, foraging, swimming, friends, past, present, all connected, all making us whole. So that is a contribution from someone in the community. I didn't make that up. And we had 50 of those in the little books embedded within the treasure hunt. So each place you went to, you'd find a new wisdom that had all been crowdsourced by the guardians from the community. And their role was also about talking to people about the project, about the ideas behind the project, and really sort of starting to ask people, what do you think about the ecosystem? What do you think about this area? So we had this kind of ripple effect going through the community, and people were starting to know about sea gooseberries. They would take a sea gooseberry around with them and say, would you like to meet my friend? And so we were really kind of seeding this for months and months before it actually happened as a big event. And then we also had this idea of exchange through the treasure hunt. So it was inspired by both geocaching and letterboxing. So letterboxing being the very lo-fi version that still exists on Dartmoor, where you find a little book and you put a stamp in it. But geocaching really has this idea of you take something of value and you leave something of value. So that was very important, that you receive this wisdom and you're invited to leave one yourself. And we had some really beautiful contributions from the public as they were going round. You can see the one at the end there, which I particularly enjoy. So the one at the bottom says, I'm going to spark a joint out here with nature and share fuck negative energy. Sorry, I don't know if that needs to be censored because we're going out at lunchtime. But I've done it now. I'm just reading the audience contribution. But it just felt really important. So that was like a bunch of girls had found this Sea Gooseberry place. It was obviously a place they inhabited, they enjoyed spending time in, doing what teenagers like to do. And they had actually chosen to engage with the project, which I just thought was really lovely. So that's one of my favourite ones, actually, because of that it was, reaching an audience. I just don't think, they probably didn't even come to the beach, they probably didn't come to the event, but they'd engaged with it, and that just felt like that was nice. So this is some people on the quest. So people were finding them in the landscape, in shops. We had them hidden in all sorts of different spaces. So during this month-long quest, people were searching in all these different places. During that time, COVID cases started to go through the roof. The government was saying very unhelpful things. The weather was terrible. But alongside all of that, people were out registering their finds on the website portal that the oracles, some of our characters, had set up in order to track Sea Gooseberry responses. And Sea Gooseberry started to arrive at people's houses. And this is the little bed that Taryn was talking about that someone made. This is like a 3-minute video that someone sent us of this little bed and their child describing where the Sea Gooseberry was going to sleep when it arrived with them. And we had 2 like this, actually, and different people were posting things on Instagram about how a Sea Gooseberry might arrive and how they were looking forward to it and how they were making preparations for its arrival, which was just so lovely and completely unexpected. So these Sea Gooseberries started to arrive at people's houses, asking to be taken care of. They all had individual names, and they all came with a little booklet explaining what might happen next and some of the connections. So the event was due to take place on the night of the full moon before the winter solstice. So it's a very important time when the tide was going to be highest, the magic was going to be at strongest, really important time in the natural calendar. It was also a few days before Christmas, so there was all of that kind of going on as well. So here you can see a Sea Gooseberry being carefully guarded by a cat. We don't know how they got to people's houses. They would just magically appear at people's front doors, and people would take them in and take care of them. And we didn't know what was going to happen. So we'd sent them out to people's houses, these beautiful creatures. It felt like a massive risk, like a massive letting go of like, okay, we've given people these things, and we really hope they're going to bring them to the beach. Because if they don't, like, not only is the artwork not going to work, but also, you know, I've really lost faith in my community in terms of wanting to save the planet, save each other. So that was quite important. It was also, you know, these ideas I had around audience scenography and co-creation, I would really have to rethink them if this didn't work. So will it work? We're not sure. So it just felt like a big risk. There we were on the beach, setting up, getting ready with our socially distanced circles, which actually turned out to be a really great way of spacing out the audience picture. Like, there's some great things to have come of this. Like, as a short person, love social distancing at events. Brilliant, can see everything. And it also meant that it really spaced out the picture, because otherwise, you know, something I've learned as a scenographer is if you don't give people the right instruction, then they'll all just kind of gather and mingle and not really be sure what they're doing. So having the circles gave people a really great focus. Here we are before the event, setting this up. Empty beach, just a few dog walkers, didn't know if anyone was going to come. It was freezing cold, it was foggy. One of our singers got COVID at the dress rehearsal, couldn't come. There was a Christmas market that everyone was very busy finishing all their shopping at. So we waited to see if anyone would turn up. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of a film that shows you what happened next. And the film is underscored by a song in 4-part harmony that was sung live at the event by the oracles. You'll see who the oracles are in a minute. And the first part of the song uses that Sea Gooseberry language that Taryn was talking about. And then it is translated. So that language was found on cards in the boxes, so the audience who'd experienced the quest or had heard all of the words before. And then the song is translated into English as the film progresses, as the event progresses.
It's
so people did come, so that was nice. And I'd like to invite those of you who have sea gooseberries, who've been taking care of them during the talk, to bring them up here and just place them inside one of these little circles so that we can also reunite these sea gooseberries again. You could put one inside the jar as well if you want. And the words up on screen, just in case anyone didn't catch it during the song, that this is the words that were translated into English, which is kind of the lead story within the song. I've just put it like that instead of subtitles, because subtitling a 4-part harmony is a little bit tricky. Reunited the Sea Gooseberries. So we were really pleased to have saved the magic with the people of Folkestone and all our wonderful collaborators. It just feels really important to say that something of this scale, there were so many people involved in it. We had our 13 guardians who, we could not have done this. We wouldn't have had 800 people on the beach that day if we hadn't have had those people, you know, really working with us in the community. Emily Peasgood, who composed the music and created that Sea Gooseberry language. We had, you're going to have to help me out with this, Taryn, with all the names of all the many people. There was Sparks Echo, who were the producers of the work, and Creative Folkestone, who co-produced it, who really put so much into it. Like, I can't say how important it was to work with an organisation who were very much embedded in the place and the community as well. That was really important. Lucas Robbins, our own Lucas from the studio, was producer at the very beginning for the R&D. Who else?
We had Dave Kircher, who designed the innards of the Sea Gooseberries.
Mystical inside of the Sea Gooseberries. And the amazing Mangostone, who are Bristol-based prop makers who created the outside magic of the Sea Gooseberries for us. I'm sure I've missed someone.
Probably, because there were so many people who worked on this.
Costume makers, prop makers, so many brilliant people who helped us out with it. And if you want to find out more, the prophecy, the story, is on the website. Is it going to move on? It's not moving on. There's this magical clicker thing that I can do for my phone, but it's maybe a little... There we go. Oh, no. There we are. So this is the website that was the portal into the work. So it's important to say people could access it in lots of different ways. You could actually do the entire experience without going online, without having a smartphone, and that was really, really important. But you could, if you wanted, access the website by your phone, by your laptop, and it still exists as a kind of legacy of the project, and you can read the prophecy, you can have a little play around and start to explore the map and see where the Sea Gooseberries were and start to experience a little bit of some of that interaction. The project film, the whole film, which includes the quest as well, is also on the website. I think that kind of sums it up. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. That was phenomenal. We'll take some questions now. Does anyone in the room have a question? Fast guy. Kick us off.
Everyone's smiling. Their masks. That's so beautiful. Honestly, it's so moving. I just wanted to ask a question about the, the boxes where people were. Was it physically those boxes with all the interactive stuff? Is that where? So it was physically placed at a location.
Yeah.
For people to find.
Yeah. So in each place there was a box like this, so a little tin box, and it had in it a set of cards that had the song word written on it, and then a little bit of information on the back. So we were really trying to look at how much information we had to give people in order for them to understand what to do, but without overloading them with too much information. And then there was the wisdom book that people could write in, that you saw the slide of, little pencil so that people could actually access that. And it's also important to say as well, this was quite tactile, so we were really trying to think about accessibility within it, people with different needs as well. So the textures are all different for each thing. The cards have a lovely embossing. I mean, you're welcome to come up and have a little touch at the end if you want. So they had embossing of the Sea Gooseberry. So, and then all those things were described so that people would know what they were looking for within it as well.
Are you doing it anywhere else? I was just wondering. Sorry, I kept up to you.
So if there's anyone in the room from an organisation that would like to help us host this somewhere else, then I would love to do this in more places. I'd love to bring it to more communities. It's obviously a big thing that takes a bit of time, a bit of investment, but yeah, I'd really like to do that.
Great. I think we're going to take a question from the online.
So this question's from Mitch. Mitch says, such a lovely project. Thank you for sharing. Who were the funding partners and how long from R&D to delivery?
Wow, okay, so funding partners, there were quite a few. So Arts Council were the main one. We had several grants from Arts Council, I think 3 altogether over the course of the project. Thank you, Arts Council, that was nice of you. Creative Folkestone put in substantial in-kind support, like really substantial in-kind, as well as a bit of money. Help Musicians UK, PRS Foundation. I'm sure I've missed somebody. Ashley Family Foundation. Yeah, I think that was all the funders for it. And timeline was massively extended because of COVID. So it was probably 4 years from conception of what we were going to do to realisation, and it really evolved over that time as well.
Lucy?
Hello there. Amazing project, that has to be said. I'd love to hear more about the Sea Gooseberries and the technology.
Oh, that's for you, Tom.
There's a lot of debate about when the Sea Gooseberries glow. And so, is it, there were some people who found that when you picked them up, it glowed as you picked it up. Or do they respond to being talked about? Or do they respond to each other? Is it that they stop glowing when you're about to take a photograph of them? Yeah. So there were many different theories about this, and maybe they're all true.
I'm not going to reveal your wizard secrets.
Did you build them? Did you build them here?
Yes. Dave did the hardware, and I wrote the software inside them. There was other magic that went on. Alison designed the shape of them. Again, there were a lot of people involved.
I think it's important to say there was a lot of testing as well. Testing of lots of different aspects of the work. So in terms of not just how the technology would work, but how people would interact with it. Things like how did it feel in the hand to hold it. Things like the quest itself. We did a whole dry run of that 2 years before. We didn't know it was going to be 2 years before, but that was how things ended up. So we did a whole dry run of the quest with a live audience, people that we didn't know, who we invited to go out and test the concept of it. And that was how we learned a lot of things that really informed how we went forward with it. We learned from what mistakes were made and what people didn't understand and what information we needed to communicate through doing that. And we also learned how we would maintain that quest, because when we did the R&D, I was running around all the locations myself trying to maintain them. You have to check them all the time. You can't just put stuff out there and hope it's going to be okay. You have to keep going back and checking it. So that became the Guardian's role during the quest, that they had boxes that they looked after, and they would have maybe 5 or 6 that they were taking care of and visiting on a regular basis. So that was something that we learned in the R&D that became absolutely crucial as well during the delivery.
Looks like Joe.
Hi.
Is this working? Yeah. that was my question. Sorry, Alison, absolutely beautiful, very moving. Thank you. Alison, you talked a little bit about your kind of emotional investment in the project, and how you understood its connection to who we are, really. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you felt about that at the end of the project, and maybe about any missing Sea Gooseberries.
There are some missing Sea Gooseberries. Not many. I was surprised how few there were, and I think a lot of it was actually down to, I know some people got COVID and couldn't come to the event, having looked after Sea Gooseberry for a month, which was really sad for them. I think it's one of those projects where I had an idea that I wanted to communicate to people, and in a way it didn't matter if people got all of it or if the meaning changed for them. Like, I think certainly for a lot of people, because of where we were in time at the point when we created, when this actually happened, when it reached an audience, I think it took on a meaning that was in addition to, and for some people instead of, the environmental interdependence. Anyone who'd done the quest, I think all of the wisdom's really connected to environment, and they would have understood that. And I was actually amazed at the responses of people in the books and how deeply connected people were to that as well. Some of the things that people were saying and coming up with, I was really amazed how deep some of them went. The event itself, I think for a lot of people, became about community and became about coming together physically at a time when, like, in that week, everything was cancelled. And we were one of the few events that was still happening because it was outdoors. We felt we could go ahead with it safely. And I think it really became something that people were hungry for in terms of connection and being together. And a lot of the audience feedback was really about that more than the environment. But I don't mind that. I think it all speaks to each other, really.
Any more questions? Oh, Tony.
Hiya, that was beautiful, thank you very much. So much of what you said feels like it was linked very specifically to the geography of the place that you were talking about. And I wonder, do you think you would get a different outcome if you did it somewhere completely, if you did it in a very urban space or in a completely different geography in another place?
Yeah, I think definitely. A lot of people said, oh, only in Folkestone. And I don't know if that's like, people say, oh, only in Bristol. And actually it's not true. Like, it can happen in other places. For me, it's very connected to the sea. A lot of my work anyway is very connected to the sea. I think that connection to ocean, particularly in kind of global stories where we're trying to talk about how we connect to everybody, the sea is the thing that connects us all. So I think in a very urban environment, like if I was trying to do it in Birmingham, I don't know how that would work, for example. I feel like it works better in perhaps smaller places because of that. There's an element of trust needed with the quest that I think perhaps in larger cities is harder because you've just got more people, so the risk is greater in terms of putting stuff out there. It would change. All my work is really site-specific, and there'd be different people who would be the guardians, different people who would be the audience, so that would all affect it. But I think it's fluid enough that the quest could adapt to that different landscape, and all we would need is an open space, like a beach, where people can come together. Like, it would be great in Weston-super-Mare. If anyone wants to help me make this in Weston-super-Mare, that'd be ace.
Any?
I was curious about what Tareen was saying about narrative, because you started off describing it as a branching narrative, but then when you started talking more about it, it felt like it was kind of going beyond a sort of, when you say branching narratives, you kind of think of choose your own adventure, where there's sort of sets of predefined paths which you can only take, but it seemed like much bigger and richer than that. And I was just curious what you had found out about interactive narratives through the project.
Yeah, I guess branching narrative is probably a bit of a misnomer for this, actually, yeah, because that is more a choose your own adventure. For this, it's more about there being lots of bits of story that you can find out in any particular order. and piece together for yourself. But you can come at it from all sorts of different directions. And again, yeah, the richness, I think, is really important. So you're trying to create a world where you're aware that there's a whole lot of stuff there that you don't know about. And that can be kind of nice, I think. It's harder to do plot twists and things like that. But yeah, I think that in a way that doesn't matter. That's more than made up for with other things, isn't it?
How did you make people aware of the project to begin with? Like, what was the very first step? How did people know about it?
Very first step is going back about 4 years, so I'm racking my brains to remember what that was. But in terms of when we started doing the quest, so we had this kind of 9-month lead-in with the Guardians. So the first step with that was really, they just talked to people. They were going out and talking to people they already knew and asking them what they thought about their environment, what they thought about the ecosystem, what they'd noticed around them. And they all did that in their own way. They were all really different people who took really different approaches to that. And they brought things back. They had journals that they were collecting people's responses and also sharing ideas around the sea gooseberries, telling people what sea gooseberries were and starting to see this as a thing, so that when people met them, they understood a little bit about who these creatures were and where they came from. And then we had these different ways in for an audience. So you could find a paper map and you could follow that. We've got one up here. So you could find the map and you could find the locations. We distribute them to different places. So they were in the libraries, they were in the main theatre space, and then we did door drops as well. So we put them through people's letterboxes so that it was right there and they could get started straight away. And for most people, there'd be a sea gooseberry, not too far from where they lived, so they'd be able to, get straight out, and within 10 minutes they'd be near to one of them. And then also a lot of people encountered the boxes by chance. You could just be having a walk in the park and see something unusual and engage with it in that way. And then, of course, we did all the usual advertising, on social media and press and all of that sort of stuff as well. But we were really looking for those extra ways in, extra invitations for people that, we all know that not everyone's looking at social media all the time.
Yeah. And was it the people you sent the sea gooseberries to, were they kind of random? Was there any connection between the quest players and the sea gooseberry recipients?
Yeah, so the way it works is you find the box. In the box, you've got your song card that you take away with you. So you keep your song card, and the magic word on the song card was different for each of the locations, and then you would register that on the website, or you could go to a local library and invite them to do that for you, so you didn't have to have internet access at all. So you registered that on the website, and that took you down a new little rabbit hole of story. So the more you put in, the more you got out, and then that registered it with our magic portal of the oracles, and then a sea gooseberry might then arrive at your home through you having that interaction. The more of these you registered, the more likely it was that a sea gooseberry would think, this is a lovely, trustworthy person, I'm going to go and stay with them for a bit.
Hey, I think it's really interesting, like you say, that online world, the real world, and then the community world. How did you manage the online functionality of it in terms of the inputs? And I said, obviously, Oracles did a lot of that work for you. But sort of, how did you find managing that when it's quite an inconsistent stream of inputting? Like, you don't know when, it's over quite a long time period as well. Is that correct?
This is the question for our Master Oracle, I think.
So we had a website that essentially you registered on, and then when you found a box, you could go and put that in, and then Alison and the people behind it can look at how well people are doing, and decide whether the sea gooseberries would trust them. And, So yeah, it built up over time, and people would have kind of bursts of going and finding boxes. I think we had, is it three people who actually managed to find all 50, which was kind of amazing. Yeah. They all got gooseberries. You had to say that you were able to come to the gathering, and that you wanted to look after a sea gooseberry. So if you couldn't come to the gathering, or you didn't want to look after a sea gooseberry, you could still do the quest and join in.
One more from the internet.
Oh, this one's just from me. So I was just, because we saw the video of like the final event, and there was like a fire and things like that, and the people wearing the yellow jackets. I just wondered what the format was for that event, and were they sort of told stories, were there songs during the event?
It's pretty much what you see. Yeah, it was really simple in terms of people arrived with the sea gooseberry. There were the circles in the sand, and each circle had the jar inside it as people arrived. They were encouraged to put their sea gooseberry into the jar, and we asked them to stay in their circle so that the singers could move around. So the singers, the oracles, are the people in the yellow with these big horns. So the sound system is a whole other story. That was all mobile, integrated, wearable sound system, no cables. So if anyone wants to ask about that later, then please do. So then the singers were moved through the audience. So you were always close to the action at some point. So it kind of retained that idea of bringing the work to the audience rather than them all kind of clustering, space people out. So the singers were choreographed, and they moved through the audience singing this song that then transitioned gradually into English at the point when they were all invited to bring the jars and hang them on this little fence. So they brought them, they hung them up. The fire was lit as the sea gooseberries were fully assembled as a symbol that the magic had worked. We were all together. People said they could see a phoenix in the fire, which was pretty cool. You know, I don't think I can take credit for that, but it was there. Yeah, and then that was kind of the end of it, of everyone kind of gathering around the fire. They were meant to go back to their places for social distancing, but nobody wanted to, so yeah, it was nice.
Right. We do have time for one or two more questions, so if you're watching online, get it in there now. Any more questions from the room?
Is there any way we can find out more information about the magic of the tech?
They're really trying.
Well, you could come along tonight, actually, to the First Friday meetup, where we will be demonstrating things.
But we're making no promises about whether the sea gooseberries will choose to reveal their magic.
Yeah, who can tell what will happen?
Why do you all want to spoil it for yourselves?
I think we got one.
All right, this one's from Kat. Kat says, do you think the event would have been different if COVID hadn't happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know, obviously, but I think it definitely played a part in people's hunger to get together, to see stuff, which I had not anticipated. I thought people would be fearful because that was kind of the messaging that was being sent out. But I think the fact that everything else was cancelled, it did mean that there was nothing else happening. There was nothing in competition other than Christmas, which had also been a bit of a concern in terms of people being distracted by other things. So I think that definitely helped. On the flip side, there was obviously nervousness. There were obviously people who couldn't go out, who didn't feel safe to mix, who didn't feel safe to do the quest. So it's really hard to say. Of course it had an impact, but some were positive and some were negative, I think.
I think Tony had one question.
The event producer in me is still a little bit panicked at the idea of nobody turning up. Like, what would you have done if nobody turned up? That feels like a negative question because obviously it was amazing and loads of people did, but what if?
Yeah, we talked about this a lot because I think for us, we were like, this is quite an exciting risk.
Yeah.
Like terrifying, but quite an exciting risk. Creative Folkestone, less excited by that race. As you can imagine. And on the day, I have to admit, I became less excited by that risk as well. I mean, basically, we just worked really, really hard to make sure that it was quite likely that people were going to come. Really hard. Like, that was the whole thing with the Guardians. And really, the quest was the invitation to the event. And there was a kind of moment where marketing focused on the event and not on the quest. And I had to really say, if people come to the quest, they're going to come to the event, because they were so embedded in the story by the time they'd followed through the quest that they weren't going to miss it unless there was some extenuating circumstance. And I think it did work. Like, enough people came who had a Sea Gooseberry, who had been on that journey. Like, the audience had been on this month-long journey of going and looking for stuff and then responding to us and having messages and exchange, having these beautiful creatures arrive at their homes, having it glow in their living rooms. They wanted to see what happened next. But yeah, it was scary, and I couldn't say if we did it again in another place that, yeah, definitely people will come, it definitely works. Like, it was a lot of work and a lot of different avenues that we went down to make sure that people would feel invested.
On the test run we did, I think we had about 50% people turn up. So we didn't have the Sea Gooseberries then.
Yeah.
We had little cards with names on that people could bring along. So it was much more of a kind of test environment. So yeah, when we got the response that we did for the final gathering, I was very pleased. But doing the test, certainly learned lots through that of increasing the kind of intrigue and the engagement to encourage people to come along.
What proportion of them did come back?
Do we know yet, actually?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I have that in the evaluation report, the exact figures of how many came back. Most did come back, which I was quite surprised at.
Yeah, I think it was 148 came to the beach, but I'm not sure how many.
I think we gave out 107. There were 173 potentially.
Oh, okay.
Including the ones that we had in reserve.
But some of which didn't go out. Yeah,
which would be included in the total. So 173 minus 148 tells you how many didn't come.
Or I think less than that, because some of them didn't get sent out of that batch. So I think it was even better than that.
It worked.
Yeah,
pretty good. So I wanted to ask a question myself. This kind of work, it's very easy for people to fall into thinking that this is for kids.
Yes.
And I was wondering how you manage that, making something which is both child friendly but not child intended, not purely intended for children.
That was a big challenge, actually, because a lot of people were going, oh great, my kids will love that, treasure hunt. But interestingly, we also had a lot of people who didn't have children, single people who had moved to the area. So Folkestone is an area where there's a lot of people moving to it from London, looking for a new start, and a lot of those people move on their own. And we found that quite a few people, the people that found all 50 were all adults without children. And two of them, I know from anecdotal evidence, were people who'd moved recently who were using it as a way to discover more about the area. The others were a couple who were searching together. It was really, I was trying to get that message out, just sort of tell people it's not just for kids. It had the sort of intrigue for children, but actually the message around it was kind of not just an adult message, but it went quite deep. And probably would have been above the children's heads. The kids loved the physicality of the gooseberries. The adults liked the kind of deeper messaging around it.
And I think the clues were very accessible. So they were kind of family accessible in that they were photos with just 3 words about describing the place where you might find it. So it wasn't a kind of cryptic clue, a treasure hunt. in that
And it was
sense.
really, if you lived in the place, you would find it much easier, because it was like the closer you lived to each of these spots, the more likely you were to recognise the images and the words. And again, the clue words were crowdsourced. So some of those were kind of meanings given to places by people locally, rather than, you know, like a description or something like that. So it was super accessible in terms of language as well. In our test group, we had a group of people, young people who had come over from other countries, young refugees, and they tested the work with us. So their level of English wasn't very good. They were quite new to the area, but they really engaged with it as well. So that was quite a good proof of concept for us early on, in terms of the accessibility of the work to different people.
And you didn't have to be from the area. So I went down to Folkestone. I don't know Folkestone very well, and spent quite a time going around finding clues, and it's really nice to say, oh, I recognise that bit from the photo. I must be in the right place. So yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's probably all we have time for. So, can everyone give a big hand to Alison and Taryn? And I think they've got some bits and pieces here for you to play with after the talk, if you would like. Now, before you all go, next week's talk is by immersive theatre director and friend of the studio, Annette Mees. She'll be exploring how her work believes in the power of the collective imagination, the importance of working together, and how culture can act as a laboratory for the future. And finally, as Taram alluded, as well as Open Studio Friday, today we are hosting First Friday, which is a monthly social event open to anyone. Takes place in the studio and online from 5 o'clock till 6 o'clock this evening. If you're joining us in person, we're really excited. The studio residents, Alison Neighbour and Taram, as well as Roxana Vilk, will be here to show you some things that they're working on. And if you want to stick around in Hot Desk today, find out more about what we do, then please come and find one of the studio team. Can the studio team wave their hands in the air? Yeah, there we go. And we'll be happy to help. If you're watching online, drop us a line at studio@watershed.co.uk. We'll answer any questions. Thank you all for being here today. We'll see you all again, same time, same place next week.